welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always, here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go through a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy this midweek episode. We will be going over the Rate My Dungeon series, and we're coming to the end of Burning Crusade, with Mechanar and Magister's Terrace being the last two of the expansion to talk about. Mechanar is located in Netherstorm, like the previous two, which were Botanica and Arcatraz. Mechanar has 3 bosses on both normal and heroic, and is a very simple layout. Magister's Terrace, however, can be located on the island of Quel'Danas, and this is a dungeon that was added later on in TBC in the last patch, actually, alongside Sunwell. So this wasn't in the base game or the base expansion pack of Burning Crusade. This came at a later patch of the expansion. It has 4 bosses, both on normal and heroic difficulty. Again, in a very simple format of a dungeon. Mechanar, we have kind of meh gear. It's not the greatest. You obviously have pieces such as Beast Lord stuff. You have tier pieces that are in there that could be utilised in earlier raids, such as Terrace, or even up to sort of the Zulaman raids, I would imagine. But anything beyond that, it's not necessarily useful. Magister's Terrace, however, is the complete opposite. The Magister's Terrace being released in 2.4, the final patch of Burning Crusade, actually was kind of a catch-up dungeon. It actually had a lot of really, really good pieces. A lot of these being trinkets, different weapons, stuff like that. And it was also utilised in the attunement for Sunwell Plateau, I believe. Or at least you had to attune to get into the heroic version as well. It's a very unique dungeon in terms of you could actually see Sunwell Plateau raid from where it was. There's actually an orb where you can view the raid. You can see Muru, and you can see the actual Sunwell itself, where Kil'jaeden comes out of as the final boss, which is really cool. But yeah, essentially the gear in there is really, really good and is above probably Karazhan gear. What's the second raid that came out? Maybe on the same level as Serpent Shrine Cavern gear, around that sort of level. Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest gear, Tempest Keep gear, I would say it's around that sort of level. The gear, they both obviously didn't get reworks in their in the Cataclysm, as no TBC dungeon did. But in terms of their difficulty, or enjoyment at the very least, I would give Mechanar a 6 out of 10. And Magister's Terrace an 8 out of 10. Magister's Terrace based on the fact that you got very good gear from it, and the fact that the bosses were actually quite enjoyable. There's one where you can just spam a load of damage. You can build up a stacking buff where it's just more and more damage. It increases your damage by a set amount, but you do take a lot of ticking damage. So, you got to hope that your healer actually likes you and heals you for this. But essentially, that's all I did. I went in there, got this buff, and just pumped the boss full of damage. It's absolutely amazing. And it's not like a small damage increase. It's like up to about 50... I think per stack it was 50% damage increase. So you could get about 200 realistically before you're taking like fatal ticking damage. So yeah, you've really got to have your healer on it when you had this debuff. The third boss in there was obviously a PvP boss, which is a bit weird. It wasn't the most enjoyable boss, but it gave some very good loot. And the weird mechanic about this boss is the fact that no one could hold aggro. They kind of reset aggro continuously throughout the fight. Because it was a PvP boss, there's 5 different mobs. There's like a warrior, there's a rogue, there's a warlock, that kind of thing. And essentially you had to CC. There wasn't any sort of aggro table, so if you were just doing a lot of damage, you were going to take aggro on them. Or take aggro, I'd say, would get looked at by them a lot more so, I would say. And then the final boss obviously was Kil'jaeden, but that's 2 bosses put together. That's Kel'Thas, the last boss, which was in Tempest Keep. He does drop a mount. This is the second mount that he drops in the expansion. In the Tempest Keep raid, as the final boss, he obviously drops Ashes of Allah, And in the Magister's Terrace raid, he can drop a Swift White Sunstrider, which is really cool, and actually farm to this day, both of these mounts. So it's very cool and very enjoyable based on the fact that there might be a mount drop at the end of the instance. And Mechanar is just very simple. It has sort of a wave system towards the final boss where you have to just kill a few waves after waves of mobs. The only redeeming quality of Mechanar was actually the mobs that had this fire shield around them that you could spell steal. And essentially, you could stack this. It was about a 2-minute buff, or a 30-minute buff on them, but you get a maximum of 2 minutes if you spell steal it. And you could get about 10, 15, 20 of these, however many you wanted, essentially. And they stacked. So you could just run into a mob and it would deal so much damage AoE-wise. It was actually the only redeemable feature of this this dungeon, in my opinion. There are a couple schematics in there, like rocket boots and stuff for engineers, a couple of relics in there. So the gear wasn't too bad, but for the dungeon and how it was laid out, it wasn't really enjoyable, I'm not going to lie. It really wasn't. For anyone just running it for gear, I really do feel bad for you. Yeah, it's one of them dungeons, it's like, it feels like a bit of a drag to put yourself through more than anything. So that's why that got 6 out of 10. Magister's Terrace, it's always fun having a mount drop in a dungeon, because you're always like, okay, here's the chance, and there's always something to look forward to no matter what. Obviously, if you have the mount from the dungeon, you're not necessarily looking forward to it, because it's just like, well, there's no point in it dropping for you. But yeah, there's always that like enjoyment. Will the mount drop? Will I get it? That kind of thing. But that is it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening, as always. Please do look to support the show by simply subscribing to the Pig and Whistle. You can do so down below, as well as Patreons there, Twitch, YouTube, loads of stuff happening absolutely everywhere. So be sure to follow them socials. And yeah, once again, thank you very much for listening, and go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.